All right, so the first thing we need to do is get our project started. So in my command prompt here, I'm going to type, let's see, what are we doing? We are doing Vue. So Vue create, and I'm going to call this do Vue. Okay, seems logical. And then we watch it run, and remember that we have this default pick the Babel and ESLint. So I'm just going to hit enter, and I'm going to come back to you on the other side when this is done spinning. All right, that all ran successfully. I've opened up my Visual Studio Code folder. I am in the correct folder of my project. I'm going to do npm run serve and hit enter and get started and make sure that my project is doing what it's supposed to, that it's wired up. Going to click on control and the local host, or type in my browser window localhost 8080, and as soon as I find my monitor, we should see our Vue app. So everything got wired up correctly. I've got an application, and so I think the first thing we should probably do is look and see what it is that got built for us and how it's showing up magically on our page. So that's what we're going to do in this video. Let's get an overview of what it is that Vue created for us. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is, let's see, we should see some things that start to look familiar. A README file was generated automatically on my behalf. Get ignore was automatically created, so obviously we are in Git's watchful eye, so a local repository was initiated automatically for me. I'm going to remove this under this \dist. We saw that in the last video. I do not want to ignore the distribution folder when we finally build this thing, because I'm going to want to use that folder to publish it to Netlify, which is what we're going to do ultimately at the end of this project. So that seems good so far. Looks like Babel was installed for me. That makes sense, because that's what's going to convert my fancy JavaScript, my ES6, to JavaScript that the browser can understand. If I look in node modules and I go down far enough, I'm sure that I'm going to find something about Webpack that was installed automatically for me, because Webpack is what's going to, we'll see, look far enough down here. Webpack is definitely installed here, included in my node modules, and Webpack along with Babel is what packages up our JavaScript into some files that browsers understand, which we ultimately deploy. So that should all be a review from our last set of videos. So let's see exactly what it is that's being installed on our behalf and how it works. All right, so let's dig into the folder structure and see how things are being wired up for us. I think at first it's a little bit confusing, and so I'm going to try and lay it out as easily as I possibly can to try and put the pieces together before we actually start working with the code. So I'm looking in the public folder to start with, so a fine place to start. And I'm going to look in here and see that there's an index file, also a fine place to start. All right, and it says that built files will automatically be injected. Okay, whatever. But what I want you to notice is some things that should already look familiar from our working with Vue. And that is, we can see that there is a element that has an ID of the word app. So that's sort of the default for Vue. In order to create an instance of our Vue, we're going to have a element that we've given it a name, in this case an ID name of app. So that's our starting point. And if we now start to open up, I'm going to open up the source folder, and there's an assets folder that has the logo. That looks familiar. That's what's being generated here. But there's also some text down here. So let's see how that all fits together to generate that page that we initially got started with. All right, so we're going to start at the main.js. I don't need the logo anymore. I'm going to try and keep up my index so I can see these as I build them side by side here. And so the first thing is main. And so I'm going to try and put these side by side so we can kind of see the flow of how things are going to flow together. So we have main, and things are starting to look familiar, hopefully. So we are importing Vue, so we're importing the Vue library, and so presumably all of our dependency files for Vue are here in the node modules direct folder. I'm also importing app from app.vue. So let me see what that means. I'm going to try to close this window up. So import app from app.vue. So I'm looking for a file called app.vue, and I'm going to be utilizing whatever's on that folder. So I'm going to bring that up and put that side by side, just recognizing that I'm importing from here to be able to generate the main. So I'm going to try and go in the chain of events here. So in the main, we're creating a new instance of our Vue app, and that's going into that ID of app, which we saw here. So this Vue instance is being plopped into this element that has an ID of app at the time that this page is rendered, is really what's going on here with the mount. At the time that this index.html gets rendered into the browser, then our Vue instance will be mounted, and at that point in time, this is another way to say it's synonymous with create element, our JavaScript create element. So create an element that you get from app, which I'm getting from here. So you're going to import in this, whatever this is, and we're going to look at that in a minute. And you're going to create that element that we get from here, create that element, and you're going to put that element into this ID that we gave this element that we gave the ID of app. Hopefully that makes sense. So import something from here. At the time that the index page is rendered, go ahead and create an instance of Vue and create an element from the app.vue, which we imported here, and put that into our element ID that got an ID of app. This is for deployment purposes. It just gives us an error message saying we're still, not an error message, but a warning that we're still in production. And I haven't seen that if we get rid of it or if we keep it, that it seems to work. So this is something I'm just going to ignore. So we don't need to worry about it. It's just a warning message. And you'll see it when you run the server. You'll see that message come up. Anyway, so we're going to ignore that one because it's really unimportant to the scheme of what's happening. All right, so let's go continue on down the chain. So we're importing app from app.vue. So we saw where we got the app.vue. That's literally a folder called app with an extension .vue. And if we look at this file, what we're seeing is that this is a component. This is a Vue component. And we can tell because it's made up of this template. And in this template, there's some things that are going to be returned. So when we import an app, we're importing this template. We're importing this information. And that's what's creating an element. So the Vue will create an element from this template and put that into this ID div. All right, so let's look at what a component then is made up of. Let me, for real estate, close this up. All right, so the way that we create a component, which is what's being created here, is that we've got our template, and that's all of our HTML kind of things that we're going to be putting into this particular component. A component is made up of a script tag, which is giving us, let's just look at this, giving us the ability to make available, that's what export is, make available by exporting. So make available this template, this component, to whoever else wishes to import it. So there's the export-import connection. So because we have in our script made an export object, which is our template, among other things, main has the ability to import it and create the element and put that into the ID. All right, so let's look and see what this is made up of. All right, so if we pick apart this particular template, then we're going to see that it has an image. Okay, that makes sense, right? So we have an image, and we already saw that image a little bit at the beginning of this tutorial. And it also looks like it too has a component that it has brought into this template. And so this is a component that is utilizing a parent template that's utilizing a child template. And so in fact, if we look down here in the imports, we're importing in a template that's called Hello World, which seems to match, so that makes sense. And we're importing it from components folder and then a file called hello world.vue. So let's pull that up so we can see this chain come together. Sounds like a Beatles song. Anyway, so let me kind of close this up so we can try and see this, how this is all working together. And so if we look at this hello world component, it is a template. So all components have a template of some type. It has a script tag that's exporting. Its name is hello world, which is what's matching up to our div or to our tag here, our HTML tag. It has props. So that means that we're able to put a message into our component from the parent. Let's touch back to that in a minute. So I'm going to ignore that for the short run. And then this particular component has some styles, but these styles are scoped. So these styles are only available to this component. So remember here in our app view, we had some styles, but they're available to all components, to the application. But this particular component is going to make itself very compartmentalized. So it literally can be plopped anywhere, and it comes with its own style sheet, if you will. So let's just, for clarity, because I don't understand all of this stuff here, I'm going to erase down from the paragraph down through this UL. And by the way, if you look at all of this code, that should look to you like what got wired up here in our browser. So here's all of this code is being generated from importing the Hello World component. But I'm going to delete this. And so, at least I think I am. When I hit the delete key, I expected it all to go away, but it didn't. So let's try that again. There we go. And so just kind of make things a little bit simpler for myself here. And so now I'm going to look at my browser, and because I have the server still running, it's updating pretty quickly. So I still have this message remaining, and that's where the props come in. And so let's look at our template. Our template now consists of a very small piece of code. It has a div, and it has an h1 tag with message inside. And so props gives us the ability for a child to receive information from the parent. So parent to child gets transmitted through props. In other words, this is a data type, what's the right word I'm looking for? A data property that's available to this component. It's my own, this component owns this particular property, and I'm going to put that property in here. And where it's getting the value for that is from inside this attribute. So now message is showing up as an attribute of the parent. The parent is app. App is utilizing this component. App is tapping into the fact that this component offers an attribute called message. And message, in this case, we're actually giving it a data type of a string. So we're saying that that message is a string, but you could do an open and close quotations if you wanted to. So the parent is sending to the prop via this attribute named message, a message. And in fact, if we do something like hello from, then we should see the same thing. We should see that change in our browser. And in fact, we do. So a lot of components there to put together. So we're utilizing the parent is utilizing the Hello World component. The parent imported that in from this file, which is this file. This file is a component that is we have a template that is utilizing this prop in order to receive message or a string or data from the parent. It is exporting itself, so that's good. So that's what's making it importable to the app view. And one other piece of information I want to share with you is that a component inside the template initially can only be one element. So in other words, if we look at this template, this component, it has a single element of a div, but inside that div, it can have lots of things. So it can have a paragraph, and it can have a UL, and it can have an image, it can have whatever we need inside the div. But ultimately, the component itself is only one element. In other words, if I put a p tag here and put in some stuff, well, that's illegal, because now, in fact, let me just show you what happened to my browser. My browser got very upset, and it says the template root can only have one element. And so when we create a component, we need to make sure that it's returning a single element. And so if I want a paragraph, well, I can put the paragraph in here all day long, and that's not a problem, because now I have one root element with as many children element as I want to include. So let's try and do an overall summary to put these pieces together. What we need to recognize overall is that all of these components are being created in order to end up in a Vue instance, which is in our main. These components are being compiled and put together and organized and conjoined and put into a Vue instance, which is putting into our index HTML, which is what's loading. So this is a single page application we're creating right now. Everything is going to be loaded dynamically into our index. And if we look from the bottom to the top, what we've got are two different components. So overall, both of these are components. And the components are supposed to stand by themselves, so they don't depend on anything else. They're self-contained. And so if we look at our Hello Vue component, a component is made up of a template, which is the HTML Vue portion, Vue, V-I-E-W instead of Vue. So it is what our user is going to see. It's our HTML. It is made up of a script tag, which is exporting as an object our template and whatever methods, properties, props that we're going to need, and we'll see more of that as we move along. But this is what's being exported. It's being exported with this name, and in this case it's exposing itself. It's exposing a message attribute so that anybody that wants to import this template can send data to this template, and that data will be put here in our MSG tag. And then in this particular component, we have some styles sheets that's specific to this component. All right, so then app is importing this component. So in order to utilize this component in its template, it is using the import statement. Import what? Import hello world. So that's the name that we're importing. Import hello world. Here's where you're going to find it. And I'm going to use it here. And so it too, the app view is a component that is made up of a template. It's made up of a script that has all of its logic. And in that script, there's an export object that's exporting to whoever wants to import this app or this component. Everything that it needs is in this export object. And so the name of this component is app. This component also says if you're going to import me, I also need to be aware that I'm using a component from someplace else. And so in this case, it's utilizing the hello world component. So it needs to export that component as well. Remember, they're self-contained. So by importing app component, you're also getting a handle on hello world, because we're exporting that up the chain. If this wasn't here, we would break that chain. So this is for export. So whoever utilizes me, I'm going to export that which I imported, so you'll have it available too. And then, let's see, what else am I missing on this one? I think that's it. And this is a style sheet that is a global style sheet that's available to the application itself. And then if we look back, continue on up the chain, we have main.js, which is where all the magic happens. Main.js is importing our component, our app component, from app.vue, which is what this component is. So by virtue of importing app component, it's also getting the hello world component because it's getting exported from the app. So up the chain there. And then at the time that the index page is rendered, create that element, which is these two components combined, and plop that in. Remember that it ends up being a single element, right? Because this is a single element, this is a single element, so the component is a single element. Create that element and put it into our div that has an ID of app. Phew. So that is components. That's what we're going to be building on, and so it's really important to get a handle on how these all tie together so that we can build a to-do application, which is where we're headed in the next video.